All righty, so let's get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining me tonight. This is actually our fourth season of Fireside Chats, or Fire Pit Chats, as they were called in the summer. I'm Mary Halpin Carter, head of school, and I thank you for joining me tonight. I'm also joined by my wonderful colleagues, Scott McPherson, who's our CFO, and that title is actually too limiting for what Scott does. He's here with us because he's also really in charge of operations on the campus, in HR, and sort of health and well-being. And then also our school nurse, Lainey Shaughnessy, who is a proud alumna from the class of 2014, and they will be joining me tonight. We've really been walking this pandemic journey together for 10 months, almost 10 months now. And we've been so fortunate to be successful. And a lot of why Derryfield School has been so successful is because of the partnership of all of you with us, with my colleagues and I, in support of all of our children. Tonight, we are going to be taking questions. We're going to give you a little update on some important adaptations that we're making to extend our success that we've had so far into this winter trimester that we'll return to on January 19th. And so we invite you, as we're talking, to submit questions to the Q&A. We prefer you not put them in the chat, but instead put them in the Q&A, and then that way, when we get to that point in the program, I'll be fishing those questions out of one spot instead of two. Just to review, at Derryfield this fall, while we were on campus until Thanksgiving, we're so fortunate in having no transmission of the coronavirus on campus. And this winter, while we were in the family phase of going to school remotely, we continued to have robotics on campus and winter sports on campus. And again, no transmission of the virus. So the multiple layers of protection that we built to start the school year, which included changing our HVAC system filters to very high level filters, having in classrooms, having freestanding air purifying machines, mask wearing, hand washing, constant cleaning of the campus, and just as importantly, 6-foot distancing at all times. Those layers of protection all added together created a foundation that enabled us to have this wonderful outcome of not transmitting the virus at school. So our faculty and staff, are delighted by that. We truly understand how important it is for young people to be able to come to school on campus. There are some students actually who thrive more in the virtual setting, but the majority of students, for their social and emotional well-being, really prefer to be on campus, which is why the American Academy of Pediatricians supported and really spoke out early in the summer about on-campus learning. So while Derryfield's foundation is strong, this foundation that we built in tight consultation with our public health official consultants, their former Air Force public health officials with epidemiology background, those consultants really helped us create that scenario. Our foundation has clearly held. However, we all know that the surrounding community in the region has not done so well this winter. And we knew that some of that would come with the cold weather and people being indoors. But we know that case numbers are up in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, that hospitalizations are up and hospitals are getting full, and also that a variant of the virus has appeared in other states and may come to our region as well. With that change in the external environment in mind, I went back to our consultants and said, what are additional layers we can add to this foundation we have? What layers may we add on top of, we're going to keep strictly following all the health guidelines we've been following, but what can we add to make sure that our foundation holds through these winter months when when the challenges are greater on the outside world and people are living a more indoor life? And so the recommended layers that we will be adding this winter are a couple. The first is pooled testing, and Scott's going to describe that in detail in a little bit. But basically, this weekly testing will enhance our screening process. So you all have been such marvelous partners in doing that joyful task of waking up adolescents, taking their temperature and asking them the same questions every morning. I'm sure that was a pleasure. So the good news about pooled testing is we're going to do that at school. You don't have to do that at home. But that will clearly make a difference in that action that screening does of keeping people who are sick off campus and keeping people who are healthy on campus. The beauty of moving to pooled testing is it's going to be able to hopefully identify people who are asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. So that will really take our pre-screening up a notch. The second layer is called, our consultant calls de-densifying the campus, which is really a word of questionable validity and questionable grammatical correctness. De-densifying the campus really just means fewer humans are going to breathe the same air. Scott's going to explain a little bit more about that. And then finally, vaccinations are obviously the layer that we can't wait to participate in. And the good news around that for our faculty and staff is that we found out that educators in New Hampshire are going to be eligible for vaccinations between March and May. So March and May will be when we start. At the end of the winter term, we'll be moving into the vaccination stage. So Scott's really going to talk about the two layers that we're going to introduce immediately as we return to campus on January 19th. That's the pool testing and the de-densifying. So Scott, thanks so much for being with me tonight.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks for having me. And hi, everyone. It's nice to be with you tonight. So as Mary indicated, the addition of pooled testing to our safety protocols is intended to be an additional layer of screening to make sure that only healthy students and staff are on campus. And like the morning health and temperature screenings that we all do, and you submit through the Magnus app, the pooled testing is really intended to build on the success that we've had at keeping the Derryfield community safe and preventing the spread on campus. It's important to note that pooled testing is an addition to our safety protocols, such as masks and social distancing. It does not replace them. Pooled testing is different from diagnostic testing that takes place in clinics or doctor's offices. Briefly, this is how it works. Pooled testing combines up to 24 individual samples collected weekly, and it combines those individual samples into one PCR test. If a pool tests positive, additional testing will be performed on those individual samples to narrow down and ultimately identify the positive case. The advantage of pool testing is it's non-invasive when compared to the diagnostic testing that you may have seen or experienced, but it does offer the same efficacy. Pooled testing will use saliva samples that are collected on campus in small groups. We're thinking it's likely going to be part of advisory, and it will be a weekly test. There are a number of boarding and day schools that have used the pooled approach to limit on-campus spread and help keep their doors open through the fall. Among them, Holderness School and Wellesley Public Schools. Holderness and some other schools, St. Mark's School outside of Boston, have shared their experiences with Ms. Shaughnessy and me, that the testing process, once up and running, becomes quite routine for students and is pretty widely accepted. They've actually found that the testing helps compliance with some of the other protocols, because nobody wants to be the cause of the first Derryfield outbreak on campus. It's really important to note that privacy is protected during the testing process. It's a HIPAA compliant process. The identity of the students and staff who are tested will be unknown to the lab, performing the tests and will only be known to medical professionals such as our nurse, Ms. Shaughnessy. The testing program will be managed on campus by Ms. Shaughnessy, who will ultimately handle the notifications and contact tracing. It's important to note that just like masks and our other protocols, to be on campus, students and staff will participate in the pooled testing program. And as Mary indicated, as Dr. Carter indicated, the pooled testing is in response to the community conditions. We'll continue the program until the conditions around us improve in order to ensure that we're able to continue in-person learning. Ms. Shaughnessy and I are happy to answer any questions about the pooled testing at the end and encourage you to add your questions to the Q&A. The second layer that we're adding, as Dr. Carter indicated, was the addition of, or an effort to de-densify the campus, which is an epidemiologist's way of saying work from home. What this means is that we are going to continue to encourage employees, staff members that are able to perform the essential functions of their jobs from home to continue to do so. Many of us have been working remotely, and so we're going to continue and expand that effort if at all possible. And this really is an effort to have fewer people on campus, which limits the opportunity for spread.
Great. I'm going to talk for a little bit about adjustments to the school day that will happen through the winter term. Again, our challenge is cold weather and snow. And so one of the challenges of the cold weather and snow is going to come in the form of a challenge to outdoor recess or indoor recess. So obviously, in a time where you're constantly aware of tracing of the virus, you want to keep people in identifiable cohorts. And that meant that through the fall trimester, our actual supervision of, for example, middle school recess outdoors was pretty challenging because kids had to be able to play, but they also had to stay in defined groups that were supervised by an adult. With snow, that removes a lot of our big, vast play spaces where we could separate the kids 6 feet from one another and also keep their cohorts separate. And our indoor space, while it's huge with our A&W, it's not huge enough to have kids moving around and staying 6 feet apart and keeping their cohorts separate. And so due to this, we're shifting to have lunch be hopefully a time of socializing where kids get to talk to other kids, have a very controlled lunch, because of course, when masks are off indoors, that's a risk time. And so kids will be definitely stationary, masks off for a very short eating period. And then hopefully with masks back on again, socializing with kids in their class. And then hopefully we plan to try to use our athletic and wellness center to have certain days when kids could hang out with their friends in stationary groups, have their lunch carefully, and then have lots of chatting time after that. But all in all, even with this new kind of approach to the lunch break, it's going to end up with our day ending about 15 minutes earlier than it did in the fall. So heads up, parents. I was always the parent that never sort of picked up on details like now school's ending 15 minutes earlier. So for all those of you who are like me, I'm going to say it again. School's going to end 15 minutes earlier just during the winter term till we can get back outside again. Pickup is, or that's our intention right now, right? We keep adjusting as we go. So pickup, if you're a carpooler, your pickup will be at 2:20 p.m. in the afternoon, assuming that kids are not doing sports after school. Our buses will leave Derryfield. The early bus will leave at 2:30 p.m. starting on January 19th. But our late bus will be the same, 4:30 p.m. So again, pickup for carpoolers 2:20, buses will leave at 2:30, same schedule for the late bus, which is 4:30. So of course, as educators of kids this age, we know how important outdoor time is, exercise time is, social time is. So just want to remind you that our after school winter sports program is still available. So even if a child hasn't joined a team yet, there's still time to join one of our winter sports teams and get that experience. So in the middle school, we've got girls and boys basketball. We also have co-ed alpine ski racing and ski, which you don't have to be an experienced ski racer at all to participate in. Um, and then middle school students are also invited to join the upper school athletic activity of strength and conditioning class and yoga. So those are two opportunities for middle schoolers that are also in the upper school. Upper school sports also include swimming, which is a co-ed sport, and girls and boys basketball, and then outdoors co-ed Nordic skiing, and again, no experience necessary to join, and then also co-ed alpine. The only caveat to our alpine team in the upper school is that we're a bit out of transportation space, so a child would need transportation to and from the mountain for that. If you have any questions about our middle school or upper school athletics, please reach out to our AD, Chris Hetler, with those questions. Scott?
So the final detail before we get into questions is we ask you to watch your email for a survey. We need you to let us know whether your child will be an on-campus learner or a virtual learner when we return on the 19th. And in addition, you'll have the chance to indicate whether your child will be participating in the school lunch program. So look for those emails looking for your feedback shortly.
So the first two questions have to do with the COVID variant that I had referred to at the beginning of our time together, and to a different form of testing, which is sewage testing, and what our thoughts were on those. So as I mentioned in the beginning of our evening together, the reason we're adding these layers that we just described is because, and one of the reasons is the potential of that variant to come. So we're taking our foundation, we're adding sort of another coat of armor on top of that foundation. And our hope is that that will help us with the variant, and it will also help us with the rising number of cases generally in the community. In terms of the sewage testing, that has largely been done in boarding and residential communities where people are spending all their time in one dormitory. Lainey, do you want to comment on that one, on why we thought that this pool testing was a really good match for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here. I wish I could see everyone. I have many faces and eyes more so to learn when we return. But the reason why we decided with the pooled testing is for a couple of things. The first being it's the most effective, yielding a 95% effective rate, with it being the least invasive. Like Scott was saying, if you've experienced a traditional COVID-19 test, it's an experience you'll never forget, and likely an experience you probably won't have to, or rather want to repeat, but will likely have to at a point given our current circumstances. But it yields a very high effective rate with it being not as invasive. The other thing with that is the pool testing, unlike the sewage testing, allows us to pinpoint back to those individuals that are solely positive versus letting us know that we have COVID-19 somewhere within our building and within our on-campus community. It lets us know exactly which individual or individuals it is, so that way we can mitigate that risk. And so that's a couple of reasons why we kind of chose it.
There's another question I think that's a good one for you, Lainey. What is the anticipated turnaround time for the pooled test?
Yes, so that is a wonderful question. So the turnaround time, if we have no positive cases, which would be delightful, it would be anywhere between 12 to 24 hours from the time that the lab receives it, up until the point where they're able to identify those individuals that are COVID positive. It's between 12 to 42 hours. So by 2 days from the time that the lab gets the results or gets the tests, which we would overnight to them, it would be 2 days that we would have those notification or that notification that I would be able to give out, and in real time notify families if their student or students are COVID positive.
Great. And so there's a question also about how that, what are, can you see that one, Lainey, about if there's a positive test in the pool, like how does that work?
Yes, so I did see that one as well. So we're still working out the logistics in terms of exactly when and how we're going to roll out the testing in terms of exactly when we're going to be getting them from students and which day. However, if there is a positive pool, then depending on where we are in the day, then those within that pool would be able to get notified that they would likely need to quarantine until we get that one positive result. That can be as short as 6 hours of having to quarantine or up to 12 hours to a day of just having to be virtual. And then that one individual or individuals who then test positive, I will be reaching out to those families, notifying them of the positive result and able to give guidance and education on both how long the student does need to isolate for that is COVID positive, and then additional guidance for your family on quarantine timelines.
And it's important to note that the retesting will use the original sample, so no additional samples are needed.
Yeah, so no follow-up testing. And then the testing that we're doing, the sample stays stable for 7 days after it's collected.
That's great. Thank you. There's a question here about middle school sports and sort of a question about their playing other teams. So the only indoor sports teams that are playing other schools are varsity basketball and ice hockey. And for both of those teams, the students have to go virtual. So they have to be virtual students for Derryfield. They will not come to campus during the school day in order to play other teams in an indoor setting. So just to clarify that, so there are not, the middle school teams will not be playing other schools. They will be having an intramural experience. Let's see. There's a question here about afternoon athletics. Will they also be 15 minutes earlier? And I texted Chris Hetler, our AD, while we were here to see if and his answer is, it depends on the schedule. He said kids could be picked up at 4:15 if parents can get there. But 4:30 is when the late bus will leave. So somewhere between 4:15 and 4:30 would be the right time to pick up after afternoon athletics. My advisee, Catherine Gage, who is a loyal follower of Fireside Chats, I might add, thank you, Catherine, for tuning in, asks, with the more contagious variant, is 6 feet apart still enough? And our fusion cell consultants say that 6 feet apart is still enough. It's actually more than enough generally. And they feel that it's confident in that for now. Of course, more is always better. So we're going to constantly be looking for situations where we can be more than 6 feet apart as well. Let's see, if a child chooses virtual learning, can they still participate in a sport? Scott, yes, right? Yeah.
We're still expecting that virtual learning students who are participating in sports will need to be tested, right? Will be part of the test pool.
That's right. If you come to campus,
you'll still be
you will need to test.
Right.
And of course you can participate in the sports program if you're a virtual learner. Do you anticipate more students switching to virtual learning? I don't know, team. What do you think?
I don't know what to expect.
We do not know. We do not know.
That's what we'll be sending out the survey in the coming days, is to get that get that answer so that we can plan accordingly.
Great. Lainey, how often would each student be tested as part of pooled testing?
So we're testing every single week. So a new sample will be collected every week.
Great. And how long will it, I think you've already answered this. How long will it take to get pooled testing results?
Yep. Anywhere between 12 to 42, let's say 48 hours, we'll have everything nice and settled.
Online schooling has been great while everyone has been online. Is it possible to try online and then to move to in-person? Yes, what we would prefer is that there isn't a lot of switching back and forth, because our faculty want to do an excellent job of tracking each individual child and their well-being and their academic success. And of course, that's easier to predict if you know where they are. They also develop, really active learning plans that involve group work, et cetera, and teams. And so for that planning, it's helpful as well. That being said, we are also trying to de-densify the campus. So it's not an absolute, and we'll be talking about that. But certainly if a child wants to start with virtual and then move to online, I think that would be fine. Let's see, you mentioned that some staff being able to continue to work from home. Does that include teachers? That does not. When Scott was talking about staff, he meant staff who are not student facing, who are not actively working with students or supervising students. Can you clarify, if there's a positive case in a pool, do they need to do traditional nasal swab testing?
No, you do not. So the wonderful thing with the type of test that we're going with, they've done quality control tests to ensure that the sensitivity of the saliva samples are just as sensitive to testing and showing accurate results, especially in asymptomatic or non-symptom showing individuals, as the traditional nasopharyngeal, which is a long Q-tip up your nose that you'll never forget.
Lainey,
but then I also just want to clarify, sorry, Mary.
sure.
This doesn't, the pool testing that we're doing is more so for our individuals that feel healthy, don't have any symptoms, have not been in a high risk environment that would require them to test as if you're experiencing symptoms, have been in touch with someone that's been COVID positive, or have done something else like traveling, things like that. It's not instead of, it's in addition to. So unfortunately, if you do develop those symptoms, then you will need to go get that traditional nasal swab. However, those outside sources are providing them. You will need to get that in order to, a couple of things, confirm that you do or do not have it. And then also to be able to see when you can rejoin our in-person learning community.
And I just want to thank parents have been doing such a wonderful job of partnering with us as a school, or they did all fall on when they, even if their child was going to have to quarantine anyway because they were a close contact, they got the child tested. So helpful to Derryfield, right? Because then when you tell Lainey, that helps us make sure that there aren't any inadvertent exposures to other kids. And it really helps us to monitor this situation. Is that right, Lainey?
Yeah, no, it's really, really helpful, because in addition to this, I'm also going to be doing our normal contact tracing, which in an ideal way, all of the things that we're doing, if we're following all of our protocols, which so far, everything that we've done and with the cases that we have had in the fall showed that the layers that Dr. Carter was mentioning, the foundation is so strong and has limited that community spread. Yeah, so we're just going to continue.
Lainey, I have another question for you on this testing positive in the pooled testing. A question that they're asking is, if one student tests positive during the pooled testing, would the other students in the pool need to be quarantined because of the exposure?
So that kind of piggybacks onto that. So if there is a positive student, then I would go through and do that contact tracing, discussing if the student does any sports, if they ride the bus, go to individual teachers, their advisors. Can you confirm that this student has not been within 6 feet of other students for greater than 10 minutes at a time? That would ensure them being a true contact or an exposure. So I'm still doing those things. If all of that turns up, nope, they haven't been in touch with anyone, no direct contact, nothing, then we're good. If there is certain circumstances, there's a carpool, there's a bus situation, things like that, then those individuals will need to quarantine, and I'll be reaching out to them to let them know.
Right, but the actual pool is just sort of for the chemistry of it. It's actually
For the chemistry,
people in the pool are not related to one another, and so they don't quarantine because they're in the same pool.
no, and depending on the timing that we learn about when it is, we might completely miss the school day. So if we do it on a Thursday, it might be, we might get those results at 2:30 on that Friday, in which case we're dispersed. So the first couple of weeks will be a true learning experience to see what we can expect in terms of the reality of testing. But talking to other schools that have utilized it and implemented it, they said that the turnaround times are pretty true, even with the increased rate that they're running tests.
Excellent. Scott, would you comment on when we plan to start our testing?
Sure, we are looking, we're still firming up the details, but we're looking at probably the end of the first week of back to school. So we're returning to campus on the 19th. So subject to final schedule, the 21st or the 22nd.
And I want to remind you of why we feel confident about that. So one is that our families have been, again, such amazing partners of ours through, and really respected when we asked for a prudent phase of being careful before in August before coming back to campus. People were so careful and conscientious about that, about not traveling outside New England. And people are really working to try to make sure that their exposures, their children's exposures on the weekends that risk is minimized, because we know what happens on the weekends and at night absolutely can affect Derryfield. And so we trust that that's happening. Plus we have all these other layers. So that's why we feel confident starting our testing the first week back. If we were one of the many colleges, for example, where the kids are coming straight from travel and really testing is one of our only mitigating strategies, we would feel very strongly about getting tested before people are back at school. So because we have all the layers and because we really are confident in people following guidelines before they come to campus, we're going to start that first week of school, which we think will be much less inconvenient for families than trying to get them to Derryfield next week. Lainey, you are on the inside call with the school nurses each week. And here's a question. Is there any news on vaccine delivery to students? Is that something the school is planning to do, or will this be done privately? I mean, it's the second question I know the answer to because you need to answer the first question.
Yeah, so in terms of students right now, so the state is doing the best that they can in terms of rolling out the number that they mentioned yesterday in terms of the vaccines that they're getting each week is only amounting to 17,000 vaccines for the whole state. And so the rollout that the state's doing for our vaccinations is still in that 1A trickling into that 1B phase of getting those first responders, those people that are kind of up close and personal, and then also healthcare professionals and individuals that are in higher risk situations vaccinated so that they can be protected. And then our next phase is going to be focusing on teachers and other individuals that are involved, along with additional people that have different comorbidities and risk factors involved. Because the vaccines have like a higher age range between 16 to 18, the state hasn't necessarily discussed how, in terms of the general public, and especially with those that do fall into that 16 plus or 18 plus category, how they're going to roll that out. The state is handling the vaccination efforts though, just because they need to handle and determine where all the vaccinations are going, along with the training of individuals giving it. And then additionally, there's more testing going on in terms of like younger youth being able to tolerate and have minimal side effects of the vaccine. So it's still pending in terms of when the majority of our students would be able to get vaccinated. As more information comes, we'll definitely be letting you guys know. But as of right now, they're just working on vaccinating adults in the community.
So there are a number of questions about teachers working working remotely. So let me 100% make this clear. There will be no change to speak of in the teachers who are working remotely in the winter as compared to the fall. Faculty are considered essential on-campus people, employees, and the only people who are being encouraged to really stay off campus are people whose jobs are not affecting students. So, for example, the people who work with Scott in the business office, and Scott, he'll be spending a lot of time in that home office right there. But teachers, we really need on campus, and the faculty who are not on campus have medical reasons for them them to be teaching virtually. That was all established over the summer. And so the teachers that you have known this year are going to be the teachers that you have. Here's a question. Is there any change to the limits of off-campus travel team sports participation? Previously 3 events per week. There is no change at this time. However, if conditions were to get difficult, that could be another layer of protection that we add. We might scale that back. So at this point, it's the same. However, that, like everything, is on the table because what we're really trying to protect is that daily classroom academic experience during the day. Students are curious. Hi, Ellie Small, another of my advisees who tunes in regularly, president of the school. So nice to hear from you. Students are also curious about where lunch will be, indoor, outdoor. What are the lunch protocols going to be? So we're working on the lunch protocols, but they will be indoors. We recognize in the cold weather, we think we pushed it to the limit this fall on the cold outdoor lunches. And so we're going to be working on short, warm, but highly controlled dining periods, and then masks back on. And then there will be some time to talk with masks on, either with kids in your same class or in some kind of arrangement where you get to have lunch and then have talking time with your friends. We're still working that out because we're going to be needing to share upper school and middle school, the athletic and wellness center. So in order to have a short lunch with friends and then chatting time. So we're working that out, but that's pretty much the answer there, Ellie. Do you think parents will be allowed to watch home games as other teams are allowing that? The jury is still out on that, and I'm still working that through with our consultant. Hi, will there be high school students eating lunch? Okay, so we answered that. And will bus drivers be allowed to close the windows? No to the windows. So we're going to have, this is going to be a how cold can we stand it? Buses were probably, what our consultant's advising is that we open, say, 2 windows in the back, 2 in the middle, and 2 in the front, because it's that air circulation. And buses and cars just do not have the kind of HVAC system that we can count on in our classrooms, nor can we put in an air purifier like we can in a classroom setting. So that's why when Lainey was saying, if somebody is COVID positive, that can mean the whole bus has to quarantine. It's really the riskier spot. Carpools are also similar in that as well. So that's why we got to get that air flowing. And in the classrooms, again, we'll try beginning of class, maybe middle of class, maybe end. We'll see what people can take in terms of cold air. But again, that fresh air, it's all about how much air we can get in there. Are you adopting the 10-day quarantine period that the CDC supports, or sticking with 14 days? Lainey, why don't you take that one, please?
Yes. So while the state did adopt the 10-day quarantine per CDC protocol, what we're looking at as a Derryfield community is what changed to make that decision. And we're really rooted in science because it's all science. And so the thing with the virus is it hasn't changed in terms of the infection period, which is where you get that 14-day quarantine if you're exposed. You can get it for after an exposure, start to develop symptoms and test positive 2 days and up to 14 days afterward. After that 14 days, the incubation or that infectious period that you're likely to become infected is over. But the 10 days that the state's advising, what they are also saying is you need to monitor your result or your symptoms for 4 days after that. So while what we're adopting is we're keeping a 14-day at-home period that includes the 10-day quarantine from the state with a 4-day at-home symptom monitoring for a total of 14 days out. So we are not switching to 10, unfortunately, but it's for the best interest. And how we also look at it is if we are able to continue to provide that high quality online education that we're all experiencing right now for 4 more days for students that were potentially exposed and keep the school open longer, then we're willing to continue to hold all of those levels of the foundation and continue with that 14 days. So that way we can provide that high level of experience and education, both in person and online. But being able to kind of keep us together.
Scott, here's a question for you. Are there additional costs for the testing?
There are no additional costs to families. Of course, there are additional costs to the school, but we really believe it's a worthwhile investment to add another layer of screening and protection. So no additional cost for families.
So here's a question from someone who says they're sorry that they missed the previous answer, but if one student tests positive during the pooled testing, do the other students in the pool need to quarantine? The answer to that is the pool wouldn't determine the need to quarantine. It would be the close contacts for more than 10 minutes. If that student was within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes of other students, then those students would need to quarantine. But the pool is really just a way of managing samples and testing in a more economical way than the usual PCR test. So not, the answer to that is no. Here's another question about the windows. Yeah, those windows are going to be open a lot. I love the idea of wearing your snow pants to school. But it's definitely, fashion will take a hit this winter. I'm going to be very direct about that. We're going to be wearing hats. There's going to be a lot of hat head. It's going to be tough that way. But again, it's what can we stand? So it won't be the same amount of open windows as we had in the fall. Somebody just wanted me to clarify about no recesses for middle school. That is correct. In terms of recess being a running around physical activity experience, that will not be happening for the winter because of space considerations. That's basically because of snow, ice, and that need. What we will provide though is social time for kids to talk with one another socially after they eat their lunch. So if you consider sitting down and talking recess, then I guess that would be that. Let's see. What about the travel option of 6 to 7 day quarantine with a negative PCR test after all that? Lainey, could you explain why we are not following that new idea?
Yeah, so it's similar to that 14-day versus 10. It's really the science behind it hasn't changed. And what we as a community are wanting to provide to you and the families that trust us to provide a low risk environment to your students is continuing to make sure that we're introducing the least amount of risk to our community as possible. And so while there are studies that show that there's less risk and there's a decreased incidence of you obtaining symptoms, after that 7 days, it doesn't mean that it's impossible for you to then test positive and be infectious to others. And then the additional thing and time frame with that is with how testing's going right now and having to get tested on that 7th day. If it takes 3 to 5 days, most likely more on that 5 day with how busy the state's been, you're going to be towards that 14 days of quarantine anyway. So we just want to make sure that we're decreasing and not introducing that much risk to our community, just to make sure that everyone is staying safe and healthy and able to do so on campus.
So thank you, Melissa Litchfield, for your kind comment on thank you for doing a beautiful job of offering in-person learning while keeping our children safe. I think what you can see here is we are choosing very conservative choices of layering on that foundation, right, of safety. For example, we're going with the 14-day, not ratcheting it back the way that the state has. That's more conservative than the state's choice. However, we also realize that we may be one of the very few day schools that will be on campus this winter. So it's that balance that while on the one hand, that some of our layers may seem kind of tough to you or very conservative. On the other hand, we think that the win will be, or we hope the win will be, that we'll be able to offer on-campus learning consistently, because that is just so important to the well-being of so many kids. And I know so much information has been thrown at you, so please don't be shy. Here's somebody who said, sorry to ask to repeat, are all kids tested each week? Totally understandable. Yes, it's a weekly test and it's not perfect. So weekly is not perfect. However, one of the ways that our consultant helped us think about it is it's like layers of Swiss cheese. None of our layers of safety is perfect or foolproof, but together, right, the holes are hopefully covered up. So here's another one about the pool test.
Dr.
Sorry,
Carter, just about the testing, it's not going to continue through the end of school. We're planning to continue it through March and then revisit it to see what's happening in the community around us.
That's right. That's right. Good point. So I think there's so much kind of misunderstanding about this pool, the other kids or adults whose tests are in your pool. Lainey, can you explain why you don't have to quarantine if somebody in your pool is positive?
Yeah, so the pools, we've yet to determine who's going to be comprised of each pool. And so essentially you may not have any contact with that person within your pool. And the other thing is we don't know like who exactly that person is. The other piece is we don't know at what time and at what point we're going to get those test results back. And in addition to this, it's another reminder that we need to continue to keep our guards up, and we need to make sure that we're adhering to all of those additional layers that we've been pounding into existence as we continue with this. Because if that one person doesn't have any contact with these other people within that pool, then there's really no reason to remove that student from in-person, and that's not our intent to disrupt in-person learning. Our goal in all of this is to limit and minimize the risk within the whole community. And a lot of this will essentially be catching people that are asymptomatic, in which case, not that they're unable to spread it, but you aren't going to be sneezing and coughing and all those things that would increase your risk to spread it. So with all of our safeguards that we have, and with the not knowing of any potential communication or being physically around that one person, the risk is really minimal in terms of keeping that person and those group of people on campus until we're able to identify that individual or individuals who are indeed positive.
Mm-hmm. So again, it's all about contact tracing. That's how we figure out who needs to now be quarantined or separated. Mm-hmm. And it's really all about, were you within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes of the other person? The tests that end up in the same pool might be kids from 2 completely different grades who don't even know each other. So the pool isn't really reflective at all of what could spread the virus. So another question of why wouldn't you have teachers and kids arrive on 119 with negative tests in hand to ensure that you're starting off on the right foot? Scott, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I think, as you indicated earlier, all the family phase that we're in now with the remote learning, as well as all of the other protocols that we have in place, sort of give us confidence that we'll start the winter term off positively, and that, again, the pooled testing is an additive layer to our protocols, the sanitization, the mask wearing, the social distancing, all of the other efforts that we put in place. So it's additive to what we're doing, and not meant to replace it. And again, we intentionally went into the family phase for these 2 weeks to allow families to quarantine and to start the winter term off healthy.
That's right. So thank you, everyone. These have been some great questions in the chat. Thank you so much. I was hoping this was going to be a 30-minute. I was trying to make it so more people would come to our fireside chats, not worrying they'd go too long. But I think the questions were great, and hopefully, really, if you have any more questions, hopefully, when there will be a follow-up letter to this fireside chat that hopefully lays this out as well, and maybe that will help. And then please don't hesitate to contact Lainey, and you can see the spelling of her last name. So everyone at Derryfield's email is their first initial, so L, and their last name. So there's her last name, Shaughnessy at derryfield.org. And we'd be delighted to keep answering questions or have a phone call. And that would work out well. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lainey. Thank you, Scott, so much for being with me tonight. And everyone, have a great night and be well. And let's all hope for the best heading into our on-campus month of winter schooling. So thanks so much, and send your questions if you have any more. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.